perceived stress is actually the exact same physiological response as an actual stressor. So if you're running away from a bear, or if you perceive you're running away from a bear, it's the exact same response that's happening. So if I looked at this situation every single night, built a fear response around sleep, told myself every single day, oh my God, it's getting late. Oh no, it's almost time for to put him to bed. Oh my goodness, this is going to be a horrible night. That perceived stress response is the exact same thing as if, you never actually slept, and could actually be more detrimental in that headspace and develop like these post-traumatic stress responses to sleep.
So that bedtime stress is actually one of the reasons I became a sleep consultant. But in this conversation with naturopathic doctor and dietitian Nikole MacLellan, or as many know her, Dr. Kokes, we talk about her transition to motherhood and ways we can all build resiliency as parents of young kids. Hey there, I'm Ashley Cooley, owner of Birth Baby Sleep, and welcome to the Bringing Up Baby podcast. Hi, Nikole. It's so nice to see you. I'm really glad we're getting a chance to speak today. I've been following you for a little while on Instagram, and as I was just mentioning to you, so often when I see some of your posts, I'm just like saying yes to myself a lot, because the messages that you put out there for everybody, I think are really valuable. I think they're particularly valuable for those mothers, those parents out there, which is why I've asked you to come on the show today. So thanks so much for doing this. But I'm wondering, before we get going, if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and what you do.
Sure. First off, thanks so much for having me. I see your posts and your audience too, and you're doing amazing things as well, especially for moms. It's a tough gig. So I'm a naturopathic doctor, and I'm a registered dietitian and a certified sports nutritionist. And I work at Proactive Health and Performance Center, where I mostly see patients one-on-one on a daily basis. And my focus is in sports, and then my focus is in performance. So everyone always asks, well, I don't play sports. Can I come see you? And I always say, certainly, like, are you looking to optimize your performance or just be better on a daily basis? And if your answer is yes to that, then I'm certainly open to seeing you. So, yeah, that's kind of my shtick and my gig. I do love athletics and I do love the athlete side of things, but mostly, here in Nova Scotia, it's a lot of weekend warriors and just people trying to get better. So that seems to be a lot of my practice. And then I just had a baby. I'm not even allowed to say just had a baby anymore. He's about a year and 5 months. And yeah, we're just cruising with that too. So all of these adventures and following you and following accounts like yourself has just been really eye-opening for me as well.
Yeah, awesome. I think I started really following you a lot more when you had a baby, and those posts around like the kind of the end of your pregnancy. You shared your birth story with your little one as well, which I found really powerful. And kind of all along the way, you'll bring up those kinds of things, which I so appreciate. Would you mind sharing a bit about your journey through motherhood thus far and what that transition's been like for you?
I sure can. So I guess in my vision of myself, I was the epitome of like a working woman, and I love what I do. I love my job. Work doesn't feel like work to me. It's something I'm extremely passionate about. And then everyone laughed at me when I said I'd be back right after having a baby. I'd be back full bore. So now, yeah, people actually get to laugh and say, you know what, we told you so. We told you that you would be so in love with this child that the transition was different than I thought it was going to be, honestly. I think I thought I could do it all, and I think I can do it all, but my definition of all has changed. So I think that that's the mainstay of how I see motherhood and parenting at this point. I shared so much about pregnancy because I was shocked about how little was shared about pregnancy. And maybe that's just because of the population that I follow or who I'm consistently surrounding myself with. But I was really surprised about a lot of things, especially here in Nova Scotia, about the care I received, and nothing against the medical system. I just thought it was interesting of follow-up care and postnatal care and how little support I had. And I think like my 6-week appointment for myself was actually canceled and never rebooked. So we're a year and 5 months later, and I've never been checked since pregnancy. And maybe a little bit on my part too of not going to make those appointments, I feel relatively healthy, and I do know a lot about health, so I can take a lot of that into my own hands. But for people who can't do that or don't have the accessibility to that, I wanted to be a little bit of an advocate to say, hey, there's a lot of interesting stuff going on. There's a lot of missed opportunities to help moms, whether that be pre, during, or post. And then with sharing, obviously, you get to hear everyone's stories who resonate as well. So it's been a really massive eye opener knowing that I'm not alone in this, and a lot of people have had similar stories, and a lot of stories have come out of the woodwork of, oh, I didn't know a naturopath could help with that, or I didn't know a dietitian could support me with this, or I didn't know I had alternatives out of the conventional care model that would be supportive.
Yeah. So what are some of those things? Like, what are some things that you found? Well, just in your own knowledge, I'm sure you've been able to help yourself with that. But what would somebody having a baby come to you for, or what are some common ailments, I guess, that you can help with?
Totally. And maybe not even just myself, but like pelvic floor physio and I'll just call it alternative care in general. So going through
Mm,
my experience, I had always played sports. I had weight trained. And then with all these changes to my body, I think one of the stories that I shared was in the first trimester, I did a really hard workout and I started to bleed, and I
mm,
panicked. Like I totally
mm-hmm,
thought I, pushed it too hard, that I was having a miscarriage, and that like why did I do that to myself? It was for one silly workout, just to like my own ego trying to push it in the gym, and look what I did because of this. So all of the
mm,
negativity and the thought process that came with it, and then the more exploration that I did, realizing that that's very normal and it happens to a lot of women, and certainly there's a safety zone where you want to get that checked, but training within your pregnancy is really important, and the recommendations around that are still a little confusing for a lot of people. But if you reach out to the right alternative care providers, there's tons of information that I was not equipped with before I got pregnant.
mm,
And then each semester or each trimester had its own adventures, right? So the fatigue in the first really geared back my training, and training was also a mental health outlet for me. So, navigating some of those experiences was interesting. And then through ultrasounds, in my experience, I didn't know this because in movies, you always see this ultrasound appointment where they're like, oh, it's a boy or a girl, and this is this, and this is this. Whereas the ultrasound tech really can't tell you information because it has to be the radiologist that interprets all of that. So you're sitting there for an anatomical exam. You hear a lot of him and haws. I'm laying on this bed, and I think I described it as like counting the tiles in the ceiling because it was so uncomfortable. Like the lights were
mm,
gross. You just hear like there was a student and the tech, and they were conversing back and forth. And I do know medical jargon, so it was interesting to hear how they were conversing, where I was just like laying there,
mm,
and then
mm.
asking questions because I am so inquisitive. They couldn't respond to anything. They technically are not allowed. So even if I knew that going in, I think my headspace would be different for preparation, or what I was expecting out of the experience. And then
Mm.
with the student, it ended up being almost 4 hours. I think it was like 3.5 hours. So
Wow.
again, anatomical ones are longer, but it was just a really long experience to just be sitting there with no information. They ended up having to
Mm,
do a vaginal ultrasound as well because they couldn't find the insertion of the placenta. And so, without knowing any of these things, your first assessment is like, something's wrong, something's very bad here. And without any communication,
yeah.
it's tough. Those days are tough. And
Yeah.
then with the informed consent of conventional medicine, it's awesome that like my OB was great and explained everything down to a T, but it was a lot of information to absorb, even with a medical background. So he, in my experience, was saying that I had initial signs of placenta previa,
Mm-hmm.
where that the placenta was starting to cover, um, I guess, like the cervical
The
hole where,
cervix.
yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. So where we were, where the baby's supposed to come out, and that's not a good thing. And then the insertion of the umbilical cord into the placenta was to the side. So he was kind of saying like that could represent, small growth in a baby or growth abnormalities. And my kid's huge and it worked out, but taking in all of those considerations, and then going home, and during the time of COVID too, doing all of these appointments alone without a support person. It
Oh
was a really
yeah.
unique experience. And again, I think that that's where a lot of those resiliency posts or thought processes come from. That we can do hard things, and we don't necessarily should be put in those positions, but you can get through them.
Mm. Yeah, that's first of all, thank you for sharing that. It's an incredible story to have to go through having a child during COVID, and a lot of us know what that was like for a lot of people. But to not have the support to be in those situations and not have a heads up, or having that communication while it's going on, especially for your first child, and as someone in the medical or health profession, like incredible how, if that was challenging for you, how much challenging that is for so many other people. So speaking of that resiliency piece, and you do speak a lot about that and refer to that a lot in your Instagram, which again is what I love, because it's something that we all need to find those ways. And kind of like the way that you put out those posts, it's like these are the kinds of thought processes that we should all be going through. It feels really important to do that. So can you speak a little bit about what that means, building resiliency, and why it's so important to have those conversations?
Totally. So resiliency to me, I think, is something like, I don't know if this is 100% fair to say, but in my practice and my experience, we're lacking a lot these days. And I never want to negate that someone's situation is hard. Through anything that I say, I hope no one ever leaves the conversation or the understanding with the thought that they're not feeling heard, that they're not feeling represented, and that they're not feeling in throughout heard. That I do understand that these things are hard, and I'm not negating that at any point, but then the realization that we can do really hard things, and I
Yeah.
think that's the most powerful part of resiliency training, to shift your mindset, and not in like a sunshine and rainbows, my reality is not actually happening, but in a context where, like, yes, I recognize that this is very difficult, but I think, with whatever that I'm doing, I can make it through, and I have this headspace and my mental fortitude that allows me to do really hard things and push through it. And of course, everyone's situation is very different. And in my experience, I would admit it's, my hard has been relatively luxury most of my life. So
Mm.
when I say this, I say it not with a grain of salt, but with the aspirations or hope that, some of the wording or terminology people can resonate with, and then use it in their own life a little bit too.
I want to share this one, if that's okay. This is what your post 1 month in after having a baby. This was one of the first ones where I was just like, yes, like, and I think I even commented like, thank you, because these conversations need to be had. It sounds like what you're doing here in some of these is really trying to fill the gaps of where you thought and what you've seen when you were going through it, that like nobody's talking about this and we're not seeing this. So your post gets into, I won't necessarily read the whole thing. It's quite large and it gets into your birth story. But 1 month in, I've never wanted to wake someone up and pray that they stay sleeping all at once. Zippers at 4 a.m. are an absolute essential. Yes, those button up sleepers. Who made
Brutal.
those? The body is unbelievably resilient, which, even just as you get into that post and talking about the birth story, you can tell how that is woven in there. Cluster feeding is shocking to the system. I'm quite certain I can be awake and asleep at the same time. It takes a village, and these are all just like these quick little points that you're making. Clearly, a couple, but some funny ones here too. But I've never felt this way about anything before. I feel isolated at times, and my world has shifted dramatically. I miss my work and passions, but this feels bigger than that. Like that right there says so much, I think. And as somebody who I work with parents, potential or like expecting parents, I work with people kind of along the spectrum. I'm seeing them in pregnancy and helping them to prepare for labor and delivery, and to have that resilience and to be able to advocate for themselves, as much as we don't want to say ever to somebody that like you need to think about these things, but you do. And from that perspective, I find it can be challenging. And then once they have the baby, I find that's when I'm more able to have real conversations with people, because now they've gone through labor and delivery. They're living that life with a baby that you can try to prepare somebody for, but you can only do so much until you're actually there and experiencing that. And so I feel like that's where, just from my point of view with following you, when you had those experiences as a new parent, and going through birth and then all the things that come in early postpartum and new baby and stuff like that, that kind of sharing is what we need more of. And that kind of, though, that real information that like, I do this too, or I've gone through this too, and look how challenging that is. What are some other things that you've gone through in that this last kind of year and a half or year and a bit where you felt like, wow, this is really shocking. I had no idea what's going on here.
Gosh, so many
Yeah.
different things. My little guy is not, maybe I should, talk to you after the call about his sleep habits, but I'm still breastfeeding. It's so interesting. Each thing I could break down a little bit. So I work 3 days a week, and my husband and I try to like rotate sleep a little bit, but usually it falls to the mom. And especially when you're still breastfeeding, like you're still that main point of contact for the baby. So, if it's a
Mm,
4 night sleep before a day of work, and then you have to integrate and talk to patients all day, your brain space, your mouth, your nothing is connecting and nothing is working as well. So, again, recognizing that that is a difficult thing, but like, how do I mitigate that? How do I do everything in my power to say, like, I know that this is bad, but I have to drink water. I have to hit protein targets. I have to do all of these other things that like build up my strength, mental fortitude, and resilience, because I know sleep is something that's going to take a hit. The
mm,
other option, and I've definitely had days of this too, where I fall apart. I don't have the mental strain. I'm in tears. I'm talking to my husband, and he's like, "You don't make any sense anymore." And I'm like, "I'm exhausted. I'm completely exhausted."
mm,
And so even when you do all the things, there's still bad days, and recognizing that it's one bad day. It doesn't have to be your baseline. Your baseline, even though things are hard, doesn't mean it has to be bad.
mm,
Also, when we think about stress and cortisol and the stress management system, perceived stress is actually the exact same physiological response as an actual stressor. So if you're
mm,
running away from a bear, or if you perceive you're running away from a bear, not the greatest example for perceivance, but it's the exact same response that's happening. So if I looked at this situation every single night, built a fear response around sleep, told myself every single day, oh my God, it's getting late. Oh no, it's almost time for to put him to bed. Oh my goodness, this is going to be a horrible night. That perceived stress response is the exact same thing as if, you never actually slept, and could actually be more detrimental in that headspace,
mm,
and develop like these post-traumatic stress responses to sleep and fear avoidance to sleep. So we're almost like making this wheel bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and this problem bigger and bigger. And if all of your conversations revolve around, oh, my baby doesn't sleep, oh, you look at them and you're almost like resenting that relationship because you're not getting something that you really really need. And then with friends, that's all you ever talk about, then it's really building this massive problem in that perceived stress response world. And
mm,
I'm using sleep just as a personal example, but this could be anything, right? And then
mm.
social media tells you all of these rules of what it's supposed to be and how your experience is not that.
Yeah.
Um, and again, builds this perceived stress response. So what I've been really trying to do, in full transparency, there's days that I completely fail at this, but for the most part, of being like, I'm doing everything in my power outside of actually getting sleep. I'm taking care of myself. I take my vitamins. I do everything to mitigate that response. And now I perceive it as an adventure. And a lot of
Mm.
people who talk to me kind of laugh when I say that. But if I treated it as anything else, I would be stuck in that perceived stress model forever. So, whatever words resonate with people. But for me, I'm like, yeah, tonight's going to be an adventure. We'll see. And that seems fun or exciting versus fearful, you know?
Yeah. So even the words you choose how help to shape the way you're thinking about it, which is going to help to shape your physical response. I mean, in just in a small way, but it does, those things really make a difference. I love that you brought that up. Obviously, I'm a sleep consultant, and we can totally chat some more about this. Um, because that is clearly like one of the biggest things that changes after you have a baby. You're learning to feed them, or you're feeding them stuff, but then the sleep is so different because they have to grow and they're babies and all of that stuff. So clearly that's a lot of the conversations I'm having with parents of little ones And somebody in our Bringing Up Baby membership just yesterday or the day before, I think, was saying something about like, what am I doing wrong? And listed all the things that were happening or that she was doing, and it was around sleep. And before I even got to post and respond, I was so happy that one or two members had already done saying, like, you're not doing anything wrong. Like, it just is this hard sometimes, and every baby's different. And it might have worked for your first, but it's not necessarily going to work now. But it doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong. So, getting to have those conversations and helping people sift through that information, which I'm sure is a lot of what you do as well in your job, is um, building that resiliency. One way I've been building my resiliency, and I went to do it right before our call here today, is I went for a cold dip. I've been doing that for almost a year now. And I had myself a couple of minutes before our chat. And so I'm like, what can I do right now? And I'm looking outside and the sun's shining and I see some snow and it's chilly today. But I was like, I'm going to be talking to somebody about building resiliency. So I'm going to go and do that. But that has really shown me, I'm sure my followers are so sick of me talking about it right now.
It's
But
huge, though.
that
It's so
shows
good.
me, I think you do it too, right? Or
Mhm.
you've gone in some cold water. I think I've
Oh,
seen
yeah.
that. But that has shown me how resilient we are. Because I think people, when I say that I go in cold water and I just kind of hang out in there, they're just like, you're
Why?
crazy. Like, do you love cold water? I'm like, no, I hate being cold actually. But when I do it, it shocks your body quickly, and you kind of breathe quickly, but then you start to like, you're telling yourself you're okay, you're focusing on your breathing, and at least that's what I do. And then after a few seconds you're just like cool, and you're chilling, no pun intended, but you're chilling in there. And it really shows that, like, wow, I thought if I had just gone in and felt the shock and was like, ooh, get out, I wouldn't be able to see just how resilient I am.
Mhm.
So that you have to force yourself through those barriers, I find. But once you see that, it's kind of incredible, isn't it? Like, and probably makes it easier for you to get in that mindset.
Totally, and that's a super tangible example, right? Like you're doing it, you're in the cold, going through the experience. But even if we saw every challenge that we face in that, so for example, because I can't think of a better one, on Thursdays I watch obviously my kid and my sister-in-law's kid, and they're both the same. They're 2 weeks apart, and they're
Nice.
both a year and 5 months right now. So um, for whatever reason, and I can't fully explain this, but every parent will understand, stuff just happens. My son pushed the other girl, and she fell, and what was in her hand smashed. So I took them both and put them in a safe area, and forgot that my coffee was in that safe area. So my son picked up the coffee, and it was cold because I only drink cold coffee, thank goodness, but poured it all over himself and all over the floor. And then
Mm.
the girl found a plant, and the plant had a plate under it that was full of dirt, and she started like licking this plate as I was trying to clean the glass up off the floor. And like these situations, anyone with multiples and even with one, you find yourself in these crazy situations where you could totally like sit down and cry, or let that defeat you, and or you could grab a hold of your breath, you could grab a hold of the situation. Obviously, like I kind of think of it as maybe even like a paramedic or an emergency type of situation. Remove the dangers, stop the bleeding, kind of like anything that you have to do, but you need to be able to grab your breath for that. You need to be able to get back down to baseline as quickly as possible. So given those type of examples, and then given the experience with cold water exposure, like allows you maybe to get there, right? Allows you to see the situation for what it is, grab your breath and move through it, and change your headspace up along the way. Like you could see that as the worst day ever. You could laugh and be like, this is what's happening right now, you know?
Yeah, totally. I literally noticed that difference. I've been doing this since, not every day, and it definitely is less frequent in the summer times because I hate cold showers. But I started last March, and I've been doing it a lot more, particularly recently. And I literally have noticed that in those moments when, if I haven't gotten enough sleep, or if XYZ is going on and all the things are feeling like it's going wrong, and you can easily just be like, oh well, today, like the day everything's shot. but I've been able to really turn that around. And what I I feel like I enjoy getting better at this, because for me, I have three kids. There are three girls, and I don't care if they're girls or boys. But one of the biggest things that I'm trying to do as they are growing up is I've been working on my own resiliency when they were smaller, because it was very evident as really small little people
Mhm.
that I needed more of that. And so I've been working on my own, but now I want to show them like how to be resilient. That's the biggest thing. One of my top things on my list. If before I leave this earth, I want to teach my kids how to be resilient. And it comes a lot with, they might see me in those moments, and you said yourself, sometimes you break down, sometimes it's not going well, but the resiliency piece can come in anytime, and it's like the repair work, or the, okay, we can move on from this, and here's how we can do that. So I love that that's been able to do that for me. And not cold dip is not for everybody, but there are lots of ways. Like, what would you say before we, end our conversation here? Some easy ways maybe that people can look at building their own resiliency day to day.
Totally. I would say hard is just so subjective, right? So my heart is different than your heart is different than everyone listening's heart. But to build you can start off really, really slowly. And in those moments where you do feel overwhelmed or feel extremely anxious, like grab a hold of that situation if you can. And that in itself is difficult to do. So continually like having this thought process towards getting stronger. And when I think of getting stronger, when a lot of people think of getting stronger, certainly going to the gym and resistance training is a massive way to do that. And the self confidence that can build from that, and the yeah, how you feel and how you present yourself to the world can really change with building strength. So I really like that one. And then everyone can laugh and be like, I don't have time to go to the gym. Okay, so what can we do though? Or what are these things that you feel powerful in? Or what are these things that you feel like your strength is evolving in? And maybe that is simple as like in a tough conversation, you're able to speak your voice. In a work situation, you set boundaries. In a mother-in-law relationship, you're able to stand your ground. Like all of these things equate to resiliency in the long run. And the more you do it, the more resilient you become, and the less difficult that hard becomes. So then there's a new level of hard that you're starting to attain to. And I think it's always this progressive push towards the uncomfortable, this progressive push towards doing things that don't feel good to do, and then accomplishing them and then celebrating your wins, to look back and say, hey, I did this. I'm proud of myself for doing this. Heck, I'm going to go get a steak dinner or something like that tonight. It doesn't always have to be reward based, but something along the lines of the recognition that you did a hard thing, and you can do hard things, and you can keep doing hard things, and continually putting yourself in these positions to test your boundaries, I think is extremely, extremely important. And sometimes you don't even have to put yourself in those positions. Life just puts you in those positions. And then again, looking back and doing some inventory on it, taking some journal notes and saying like, this is what happened, this is why it was hard, and this is how I moved through it. And next time a situation like this comes up, this is how I'm going to handle it, or this is how I'm going to navigate through it a little bit better.
Mm, yeah, I love that. So it comes in all those life, like the day to day stuff, like you said, you can build it and find it for yourself, but it's the practice of doing it. And that's definitely what I've learned. Like going in the cold water for 2 minutes one time, it feels great. Like there's some short term benefits that are absolutely amazing, but that's my thing for resiliency. Everybody has their own, like you said, everybody has their own hard. I love that kind of saying too, because one person's heart isn't the same as another person's. Same like one person's baby is not the same as the other baby. And that's where I love to get to help parents celebrate those wins, that because there are some, but we tend to focus on those negative things. And that's where I think that that resiliency piece gets harder to do.
Just from everything that you're saying, I had one strong thought, and kind of
Ooh.
based on your earlier questions too. The one thing that I found very challenging and very interesting is the dynamic between my husband and I with a new baby. So
Mm.
what I'm thinking about too in a lot of this is the resentment buildup for somebody not being able to read my mind. And that's not fair. So this is when you asked about other challenges or other interesting things. I think that this has been a very strong play in my mind, and I'm continually thinking about it and continually adapting my response to this. But initially, just like these deep, dark stares into somebody's soul are not helpful, right? And he would only learn or know, he doesn't inherently know what I need just because I was his partner for 12 years. I don't even know what I
Mm.
need. So how could I ask somebody else to mind read what I need? And I think if there's any tool that has been really beneficial for me, again, with all of the resiliency building factors, but just telling somebody what you need, just straight up saying it out loud so everyone knows, whether it be like a chart on the fridge, whether it be like, I need these 6 bottles cleaned every single night by 6 o'clock, and that's what I need from you, is extremely, extremely important. And if you are not knowing what you need, or if you can't figure that out, being completely communicative and transparent with that too, because if not, the resentment builds so strong between couples, and it's not really either or's fault. It's just a lack of communication oftentimes too. So, suppressing all of that again is going to build that perceived stress response, and that perceived stress response is going to do a ton of stuff to your hormones, which are already on this crazy roller coaster. And we could get really into physiology on what's actually happening there. But the broader context is communicating what you need, and also that when that resentment starts to build, you got to do something with it, because it's just making every single situation worse. And one thing that I've really started to accept or adapt to is just doing it, just doing the thing. So I've changed 30 diapers today. 30 is obviously an exaggeration. I've changed like 6 diapers today on a bad day. And then my husband gets home from work and he needs another diaper change. And I just like stare and I let the smell waft for a second, and I could stay in this mindset of like, I don't want to change another diaper. I've done so many today. This is brutal. Or you could just go change the diaper or ask
Mm.
for somebody to go change the diaper, and then it's resolved, instead of just being like, why didn't he know to go change the diaper? Why didn't my partner know to go change the diaper? So I think a lot of these things in that perceived world make or amplify how you're feeling, and I think that that is one tool, if anyone can kind of adapt, might be really helpful for them too. I'm
Hmm.
sure you hear
That's
stories like that all the time.
Oh my gosh, I don't just hear it, I live it. That's totally what happens. That kind of thing. It's happened many times in our journey with having kids and having more kids. And it only amplifies. The more kids you have, there's more mess, there's more whatever, there's more things to do. And that resentment piece can absolutely build up. So I'm so glad you brought that up, because even if you don't, because this is where I found myself. I would hear all the time, like, ask for what you need, or tell somebody, or get some help with that. And yeah, sometimes I could do that, but a lot of times, honestly, I had no idea what I needed. And so, like, how am I supposed to ask for help? I don't know, like, what that even looks like. So it can be just as helpful to kind of know what you don't want at the same time. So any kind of, or like you're saying, communicating that you don't know what you're looking for, but you're in this space working it out together, as opposed to stewing on it and letting it ruminate, or, having that stress response that's happening that doesn't necessarily need to.
Totally. And the wording that people choose is exactly it too. Like if there's words that you need to set boundaries on, or things that people will say like, oh, I had no problem breastfeeding, try this. And you're like, maybe I'm not looking for help. Maybe I'm just looking for a listening ear right now. And being really clear with those boundaries will serve you so well. And being vulnerable with that is super uncomfortable. But if you can kind of get up the nerve to start, then there's no stopping you. And it's everything that's going to serve you in the long run too.
Nice. Amazing. Super confidence building, that's for sure. This has been wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing part of your story and how we can all kind of work on that resiliency piece. Can you share with us where people can find you if they want more information, or to set an appointment or anything like that?
Totally, yes. So at sports.kokes on Instagram, SPORTSDOCKOKES, is where I put all of this resiliency information. I have a newsletter out that is in the link in my bio for the Instagram, which is called Sunday Sessions. And I try to share a lot of this stuff, whether it be nutrition, exercise, interesting science, that sort of stuff. So it's just a bunch of free information. I have a podcast called The Off Season, not as specific to new moms, but again, that resiliency factor, health and wellness tips are on there. And then I work at Proactive. So it's in Burnside on Acrely, and you can call in and book or book online. And there's a link in my bio to book as well. And just book in for a new patient visit, or I often do 15-minute free discovery calls to see if we would work well together as well.
That's nice. That's always good to know before setting that appointment. We'll definitely link to all that in the show notes so people can find it very easily. Thank you again so much for this. I hope we can chat again some more in the future. Maybe we should chat about some sleep too, but it's just been really helpful. And I always enjoy having these conversations, because even though our podcast is bringing up baby and the original intent was all about the babies, the people bringing up the babies are just as important, if not more important, because that's what they need to see, those babies as they grow up, how resilient we can be so that they can do that too. So it all comes full circle.
I love it.
Anyway, thanks so much. Thanks so much, Dr. Kokes. We'll see you on Instagram.
Thanks for having me.
If you're looking for more information or support along your parenting journey, check out birthbabysleep.ca. That's where you're going to find prenatal classes, postpartum and new baby resources, and sleep support during the childhood years. You can now join our Bringing Up Baby community membership as well, which has tons of additional benefits to helping you through all kinds of sleep challenges and transitions, navigating the transition to solid foods, and even your transition through early parenthood. If you have any questions, just send them my way. Lastly, but certainly not least, if you got something out of this episode or our show in general, leaving a rating or a quick review goes a really long way to helping others find us. So please consider leaving one. That's all for now. I'm Ashley Cooley, and we'll see you back here next time.